Imagine this. You're sitting alone. The soft hum of the world around you fades into the background. The air is still, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you are completely at peace. The trees outside sway gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering in harmony with your calm mind. This is a rare moment, a gift. You've cultivated this sense of tranquility, and it feels almost sacred. But then, suddenly, your phone rings. The peaceful bubble you've carefully crafted bursts with a single, jarring sound. In that instant, your mind shifts. Your calm is disturbed. The noise of the world rushes back in, and you realize something: the connection you had with the outside world, the one you'd so carefully nurtured, is as fragile as a leaf caught in the wind. This is the paradox of human connection. We crave it, yet, without even realizing it, we push people away. We wonder why some relationships fade, despite our best intentions and efforts. Why do our attempts to connect sometimes leave us feeling more isolated? Buddhism teaches us that everything in life is impermanent, that nothing stays the same forever, not even our relationships. But how do we navigate this impermanence? How do we become more mindful of our actions and the subtle ways we may be unknowingly pushing others away? How do we maintain connections that feel deep and lasting in a world that is constantly shifting? Today in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into 5 behaviors, small, often unnoticed actions that might be pushing people away. We'll explore how these habits shape our relationships, and more importantly, how we can transform them. Using the wisdom of Buddhism, we'll look at how practicing mindfulness in our daily interactions can help us cultivate stronger, more meaningful connections with others. Ready to explore this journey with me? Let's begin. 1. The unseen weight of oversharing. The Buddha's teachings on boundaries. In today's world where connection often feels like a fragile thread, we all seek to be seen and understood. It's a basic human desire to share our stories, our struggles, our triumphs. But what happens when we give too much, too soon? This is a question that many of us grapple with, especially in the early stages of a relationship. We open up thinking we are forging a deeper bond, but in reality we might be pushing someone away. This is where the Buddhist wisdom on boundaries becomes so crucial. Picture this. A man weary from a long journey is carrying a heavy load on his back. His shoulders ache, his steps slow, but he pushes forward, determined. Along the way he meets a fellow traveler, and with a sense of urgency he starts unloading everything from his pack, every heavy stone, every burden, every piece of his past. He talks of the mountain of struggles he's faced, of losses and disappointments, as if his new companion is the one who must now carry the weight. But the traveler, overwhelmed, steps back, unsure how to respond. The kindness of the first traveler becomes a burden. His need to unload, his desire to connect through sharing, has clouded the path they were meant to walk together. This image of the traveler and his burden mirrors the effect of oversharing in relationships. While it's true that opening up is an essential part of connecting, we must also recognize when it becomes too much. The Buddha's teachings on right speech offer a gentle reminder: know the right time to speak, and know the right time to remain silent. When we rush to reveal our most vulnerable parts, our fears, our insecurities, our wounds, we may unintentionally put too much weight on the other person. They aren't ready to bear it. They haven't yet earned the depth of our pain or our history, and thus we risk overwhelming them before they've even had a chance to understand who we are. Take a moment to reflect on your own relationships. How many times have you felt the urge to speak, to share because you wanted to be understood? Perhaps you've spoken about past heartaches, failures, or even your deepest insecurities, hoping it would bring you closer. But did you ever pause to consider how the other person felt in that moment? Were they ready to carry that weight with you, or were you, in your eagerness to connect, pushing them away without realizing it? Buddhist philosophy teaches us that relationships, like everything else in life, are impermanent. They must be nurtured with patience and care, not rushed or forced. Oversharing is often a defense mechanism. We share too much because we are afraid of rejection, afraid that if we don't reveal ourselves fully, the other person might leave. It's as though we are saying, "Here is all of me, take it or leave it." But by doing so, we remove the space for the other person to decide who we are for themselves, to explore the relationship at their own pace. Imagine this in a more personal light. There's a story of a woman named Maya who met someone she was genuinely excited about. As the date unfolded, she felt the familiar tug to share, to connect deeply, to be understood. So she began to open up about her past, about a painful breakup and the scars it had left. She talked about her fears of being abandoned, of her anxiety around relationships. The man listened politely, but as the evening wore on, Maya noticed a shift. His responses became shorter. He seemed distant. By the end of the night, the connection she had hoped for felt strained and awkward. Maya, later reflecting on the evening, realized that in her eagerness to bond, she had shared too much too soon. She hadn't allowed him the time to get to know her, to form his own opinions. Instead, she had filled the air with her burdens, expecting him to carry them. In that moment, she understood the Buddhist principle of moderation, everything in balance, including the way we open up to others. This is the delicate dance of human connection. We must learn the art of patience. When we take the time to build trust gradually, when we allow space for the relationship to breathe, we give the other person the opportunity to explore us, not through the weight of our past, but through the presence of who we are in the moment. So the next time you feel the urge to overshare, pause. Ask yourself, is this the right time? Is this person ready to hear my story? Trust that by allowing the connection to unfold naturally, without rushing to reveal everything at once, you are giving both yourself and the other person the space to grow. The beauty of any relationship lies not in the burden we carry, but in the lightness with which we share it. Through mindfulness and the wisdom of the Buddha, we learn that boundaries are not walls. They are bridges. They are the threads that allow us to weave our stories together with others in a way that nurtures both connection and respect. When we share in moderation, when we wait for the right time, we not only protect ourselves, but also protect the possibility of a relationship that can flourish naturally. 2. The power of energy. Balancing positivity and negativity. Let's take a step back and reflect on the energy we bring into our interactions. It's a question worth pondering. What kind of energy do we share when we meet someone? Do we lift them up, or do we unintentionally burden them? These subtle energies we transmit can have a lasting impact on the connection we share with others. The Buddhist teachings on the kleshas, the mental states that cloud our judgment and disturb our peace, shed light on how energy, both positive and negative, shapes our relationships. In particular, one of the most pervasive kleshas is negativity. At first glance, negativity might seem like simply complaining, being pessimistic, or dwelling on what's wrong in the world. But the reality is much more insidious. It can be far more subtle. Think about the last time you met someone, and without thinking, the first words you spoke were about how stressed or overwhelmed you felt. Maybe it was about a work deadline, a problem in your personal life, or just the chaos of the day. You weren't intentionally trying to drag the other person down, but in doing so, you may have unknowingly burdened them with your own emotional weight. Imagine this scenario. you meet an old friend for coffee. The moment you sit down, you sigh deeply and begin listing everything that's going wrong in your life. Your friend listens politely, but as the conversation continues, you can see their energy waning. Their smiles are less frequent, their responses more distant. You walk away feeling a sense of relief. Finally, you've shared your troubles, but what you don't realize is that the friend you've just met is now carrying the weight of your negativity. Without meaning to, you've made them a vessel for your struggles. This is the quiet power of energy. It's not just about what we say, but about how we say it and the energy we carry with us as we move through the world. Buddhists understand that we all have the power to influence others' energy, whether consciously or unconsciously. The kleshas can trap us in a cycle of negativity, and when we don't check our own mindset, we may unknowingly infect others with it. But there is another way. The Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, revered in Buddhism for embodying compassion, teaches us the kind of energy we should strive to cultivate. According to legend, Avalokiteshvara would encounter people suffering from every kind of hardship, grief, pain, fear, and no matter how deep their sorrow, the Bodhisattva would respond with boundless compassion, always offering comfort and peace. Avalokiteshvara wasn't simply offering empty words of encouragement. The energy they shared was one of deep, authentic peace. No matter what the person was going through, Avalokiteshvara's presence brought lightness to their suffering. This is the kind of energy we are encouraged to bring into our own relationships. Imagine walking into a room full of people. What kind of energy do you want to bring into that space? Do you want to add to the stress and tension, or do you want to be the source of calm, a reminder that it's possible to find peace even in chaos? It's not about ignoring life's difficulties or pretending everything is fine when it's not. Instead, it's about choosing how we respond to challenges and how we share those challenges with others. Let me tell you a story. Once, a woman named Lee was attending a meditation retreat in a small Buddhist monastery tucked away in the hills. The retreat was a peaceful escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. But one morning, a fellow participant, Dan, arrived with heavy shoulders. He had just gone through a tough breakup, and his heart was broken. During one of the meditation sessions, Lee noticed Dan sitting across from her, his energy like a dark cloud hovering over him. As the session continued, she felt an overwhelming urge to go speak with him after it ended. When she did, Dan opened up about his pain, but instead of focusing solely on his grief, Lee spoke from a place of compassion, sharing a lesson from her own life. Every storm, no matter how fierce, eventually passes. The rain may be heavy, but it's the rain that nourishes the soil for future growth. At first, Dan seemed resistant, as if he couldn't see past the clouds of his own emotions. But as Lee continued to speak calmly and gently, he began to relax. By the end of their conversation, Dan felt a sense of lightness, as if his burden had been shared, but not in a way that dragged him down. Instead, Lee had offered him hope, not by denying his pain, but by gently reminding him of the possibility of healing. In that moment, Lee became a channel for positive energy, showing how even a simple interaction can shift someone's perspective. This story is a beautiful reminder of the Buddhist practice of right speech, not simply about what we say, but how we say it. Right speech encourages us to bring mindfulness into our conversations. It's not about forcing positivity into every moment, but rather about being conscious of how our words and actions affect those around us. We don't have to sugarcoat life's difficulties, but we can offer compassion and perspective that helps others see hope, even in the midst of hardship. So the next time you find yourself with a friend or loved one, ask yourself, what energy am I bringing into this space? Are you leaving them feeling drained or uplifted? Are you contributing to their burdens, or are you offering them a space to lighten their load? It's a small shift, but one that can change the course of our relationships. Instead of focusing on the dark clouds in your life, bring a little sunshine. Show the people around you that even in the toughest moments, there is always a chance to find peace. The power of energy is profound. It's the unseen force that guides how we connect with others. It's a power we can control, shaping our relationships with mindfulness, compassion, and care. When we choose to be mindful of the energy we carry, we create connections that uplift both ourselves and those we meet along the way. 3. The illusion of control, mindful drinking and self-respect. It's a familiar scene, a gathering, a social event, and the pressure to blend in, to feel relaxed, to be part of the moment. The glass in your hand filled with wine, beer, or perhaps something stronger begins to ease the nerves. The conversation flows more easily. Laughter feels natural, and for a fleeting moment, the tension that accompanies human interaction starts to melt away. But beneath this seeming relaxation, there's a subtle shift that we often fail to notice. Our sense of self is quietly slipping away. As the night progresses and the drinks keep coming, the boundaries between who we are and who we think we need to be begin to blur. Words spill out, unfiltered. Emotions rise to the surface. Perhaps anger, perhaps vulnerability. Suddenly, we've crossed a line. We've said things we didn't mean, acted in ways that don't align with our true selves, and perhaps most concerning of all, we've lost the connection to the very essence of who we are. The Buddha warned us about the dangers of indulgence, about losing ourselves in the pursuit of comfort or external validation. In Buddhist philosophy, indulgence is seen as a klesha, or mental affliction, a state of unwholesome attachment to pleasure that clouds our judgment. The middle path, as taught in the Eightfold Path, urges us to find harmony in all aspects of life, whether it's in our relationships, our work, or even in the way we approach substances like alcohol. But too often, we mistake the fleeting comfort alcohol provides for true peace. And in doing so, we lose touch with the clarity and mindfulness that could lead to authentic connection. Think of a tightrope walker, their feet delicately balanced on a thin wire. They move slowly, cautiously, always aware of the need to maintain their center of gravity. The moment they lean too far to one side, their body tips, and the fall is inevitable. In relationships, it's the same. If we indulge too much, whether in alcohol, food, or even our desires, we risk tipping the balance of our behavior, disrupting the natural flow of connection with others. It's in these moments that we may unintentionally push people away, not because of what we've said or done consciously, but because we've lost control of our actions. Let me tell you the story of Thomas, a man in his early 40s who struggled with this very issue. He was someone who had always found it difficult to express his feelings openly, and social situations often made him uneasy. To cope, he would drink just enough to loosen up. One evening, he went on a date with a woman named Clara. At first, everything seemed perfect. There was chemistry, shared interests, and laughter. But as the drinks flowed, Thomas began to lose his grip. What started as light-hearted banter soon turned into oversharing. He spoke about his past relationships, his insecurities, and before long, he found himself saying things that were not only inappropriate, but also deeply personal. Clara, initially charmed by his vulnerability, began to pull back. Her smile faded, and the warmth of the conversation turned cold. Thomas, in his alcohol-induced haze, couldn't understand what had gone wrong. When the date ended, Clara didn't reach out as he had hoped. In the days that followed, Thomas reflected on the night. He realized that in his effort to feel comfortable and confident, he had indulged too much. He had surrendered the balance he normally held and had allowed alcohol to lead him away from his true self. That night, Thomas had allowed his desire for connection to overshadow his need for mindfulness and self-respect. This is where the wisdom of the Buddha can guide us. His teachings emphasize mindfulness as the path to clarity, to the deathless state of inner peace. The Buddha said, "Mindfulness is the path to the deathless, while heedlessness is the path to death." When we practice mindfulness in our actions, when we stay present, aware of the moment, and respectful of our own limits, we maintain a clear connection to who we truly are. In this state, we can bring our best selves into every interaction, creating lasting, meaningful connections that aren't tainted by regret or missteps caused by overindulgence. Imagine, for a moment, a different kind of date, a quiet evening, where both people are mindful of their words, of the space they share, and of the energy they bring into the room. In this scenario, the connection flows naturally, without the need for substances to bridge the gap. Each word spoken is intentional, each action rooted in clarity, and the entire exchange feels authentic. There's no rush, no need to impress, just two people genuinely getting to know one another, guided by respect for themselves and each other. By practicing mindfulness, we can avoid the pitfalls of indulgence, whether it's in alcohol or in our desires. It's about maintaining a sense of balance, about knowing when to say no, when to stop, and when to be fully present with someone without the interference of external distractions. The next time you find yourself in a situation where the temptation to drink or indulge arises, take a moment, breathe, pause, ask yourself, am I honoring myself in this moment? Am I offering the best version of myself to the person I'm with? True self-respect comes not from pleasing others or fitting in, but from being able to look inward, to maintain clarity, and to honor your own boundaries. And in doing so, you'll create relationships built on trust, respect, and the kind of balance that allows them to thrive. 4. The dangers of intensity. Cultivating patience and space. We've all been there, haven't we? That sense of urgency, that feeling that something, anything, needs to happen now. When we want a relationship to work, we can sometimes find ourselves pushing too hard, trying to force an outcome that hasn't had the time to bloom. Whether it's texting constantly, seeking reassurance after every message, or jumping into an overly familiar dynamic too soon, there's a fine line between showing interest and creating pressure. And when we cross that line, we risk overwhelming the very person we want to connect with. I remember a time when a close friend, Sarah, found herself in the midst of such a situation. She had recently started dating someone named Jason. It was early days, and she felt an instant connection, excited. She imagined all sorts of possibilities, dates, adventures, and long talks about their future. But as the days went on, Sarah's excitement began to morph into something more intense, even anxious. She texted him every morning and evening, double-checking if he was still as interested as she was. When he didn't reply quickly enough, her thoughts spiraled. Did I say something wrong? Is he losing interest? The intensity of her feelings was so overwhelming that it started to affect their interactions. Jason, who had been enjoying getting to know Sarah, suddenly started pulling back. He wasn't sure how to handle the constant barrage of texts and reassurances. One evening, Sarah called me, distraught. I don't understand. Why isn't he replying the way he used to? What did I do wrong? I took a deep breath, knowing what I needed to say. Sarah, you're suffocating him. You want him to respond, but you're rushing him before he's had a chance to really connect with you. Relationships aren't supposed to be forced. They grow at their own pace. Just like a flower, they need space to bloom. This story, though personal, reflects a broader issue many of us face when it comes to relationships. We get excited, we see potential, and in our eagerness to see that potential realized, we push too hard. Buddhism teaches us the importance of patience. With patience, you can achieve great things. Patience isn't just a passive waiting, it's a powerful practice of allowing things to unfold naturally. In relationships, just like in a garden, we cannot rush the growth process. The seeds of connection take time to take root and bloom. Think of a gardener tending to a rose bush. If the gardener keeps pulling at the plant, forcing it to grow faster, the plant becomes weak, fragile, and may not bloom at all. Instead, a good gardener knows when to water, when to give the plant space to stretch toward the sun, and when to step back, allowing the natural process of growth to unfold. Relationships are much the same. When we apply too much pressure, whether emotionally or through constant contact, we forget that true connections take time to develop. Forcing someone to feel something they're not ready to feel, or pushing them into a relationship before they're comfortable, creates imbalance. It might seem counterintuitive, but the best way to nurture a relationship is to allow both people the space to grow into it gradually, at their own pace. Take, for instance, the teachings of the Bodhisattvas. In Buddhism, the Bodhisattva vow is a vow of compassion, of patience, and of wisdom. When we approach relationships with the same gentle hands, with the same patience and care that a bodhisattva would show to others, we give the other person the time and space they need. Patience isn't about passively waiting, but about respecting the natural course of the relationship, allowing it to develop without forcing anything. I recall another story, this one about my cousin Emily. She had been dating someone for a while, and things were going well. However, she felt an intense urge to define the relationship quickly, to know whether they were truly heading in the direction she hoped. She bombarded him with questions, pushing for clarity, seeking reassurance in every conversation. But instead of helping, it created a rift. He started to feel cornered, unable to breathe freely in the relationship. Emily didn't realize it, but her intensity was causing him to question whether he was ready for the kind of commitment she wanted. One day, after a particularly tense conversation, Emily realized she had been so focused on the outcome, on the end goal, that she had neglected to enjoy the present moment of simply being with someone and letting the relationship unfold. That evening, she made a choice to step back, to allow things to develop without putting pressure on it. She texted him, apologizing for her impatience and explaining that she wanted to allow them both to discover the relationship naturally, without any expectations. From that point forward, things started to change. Emily felt lighter, no longer weighed down by the urgency to control the situation, and as she gave him the space he needed, the relationship blossomed in a way that felt authentic and true to both of them. It was through cultivating patience and stepping back that Emily created the conditions for a deeper, more meaningful connection. This story mirrors the teachings of the Buddha in many ways. The practice of patience isn't about holding back or repressing our desires. It's about knowing when to release control, to trust that the relationship, like all things in life, will unfold in its own time. When we stop rushing, when we stop forcing, we make room for true growth. Relationships thrive, not in the rush to get somewhere, but in the quiet moments of presence, of allowing space, and of letting go of the need to control. So, next time you find yourself feeling anxious or intense in a relationship, take a deep breath. Remember that just like the gardener tending to their plants, you don't need to rush the process. Relationships are not about forcing a connection, but about allowing it to grow organically. With patience, space, and a little faith in the natural rhythm of life, you'll find that what blooms will be far more beautiful and lasting than anything you could have rushed into. 5. The art of listening. A Buddhist approach to connection. Imagine for a moment sitting across from someone you're getting to know, a friend, a partner, a new acquaintance. You're eager to connect, to truly understand the other person, to form a bond that feels genuine and meaningful. But as they begin speaking, you find yourself drifting. Your mind wanders, your thoughts race to what you'll say next. Or maybe you're distracted by the background noise of the room. You nod politely, but the connection feels like it's slipping away, even as the words are being spoken. In that moment, you realize you're not really listening. This isn't just a minor mistake. It's a missed opportunity. You see, deep listening is one of the most powerful ways we can connect with others, yet it's often something we overlook. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha speaks about the importance of mindful listening, encouraging us to practice a type of listening that is not about waiting for our turn to speak, or about judging the other person's words, but about being fully present in the moment. Listening, in Buddhist terms, is an art, a practice that demands patience, attention, and mindfulness. How many times have we sat across from someone, whether on a date or during a casual conversation, and found our thoughts wandering? We're preoccupied with how we're coming across, with what we should say next, or with what someone else might think of us. This distracts us from the essence of the conversation and creates a barrier that keeps us from truly connecting. I'll never forget a story my grandmother told me about her youth. She was a young woman, new to a small village, and she had a neighbor, an older gentleman named Master Li, who was known for his wisdom and deep presence. One afternoon, they sat together for tea, and the conversation turned to life's challenges. At one point, she started sharing a difficult experience she was going through, a personal struggle she had kept buried for years. As she spoke, Master Li didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to offer advice or share his own thoughts. He simply listened. With every word, he was present, his eyes soft, his posture relaxed but attentive. She could feel his full attention, as if the world outside had disappeared, leaving only the space for her voice to be heard. At the end of her story, she paused, unsure of what to expect. But to her surprise, Master Li didn't offer the kind of advice she thought she'd hear. Instead, he said simply, "You've carried this burden for a long time, haven't you?" It wasn't about giving her answers. It was about acknowledging her struggle in a way that made her feel understood, valued, and respected. This kind of listening is powerful. When we listen in this way, we create space for the other person to be seen, to be heard, and to feel truly understood. It's no longer just about the words they say. It's about hearing the feelings, the unspoken emotions, the experiences behind those words. This is the essence of deep listening, a skill that, when practiced, can transform the way we connect with others. Think about a time when someone truly listened to you. I'm not talking about a surface-level conversation where the other person nodded and smiled as you spoke, but the kind of listening where they were fully present, where you could feel their undivided attention on you. How did that make you feel? It's likely that in that moment, you felt a deeper sense of connection, of trust, and of validation. On the flip side, think about the times when you felt ignored or dismissed in a conversation. Perhaps it was when someone was distracted by their phone, or when they seemed more focused on their own thoughts than on what you were saying. It's easy to see how this kind of disconnection creates a barrier. The flow of communication is broken, and instead of feeling heard, you might have left the conversation feeling unseen, unimportant, or misunderstood. This is why the Buddha's teachings on mindfulness are so relevant to our relationships. When we listen mindfully, we're not just hearing the words, but we're attuned to the emotional undertones, to the pauses, to the body language, and to the unsaid feelings that color the conversation. We create an environment where the other person feels comfortable opening up, where they feel safe enough to express their thoughts and emotions freely. Take, for example, a conversation between two people in a romantic relationship. One person is sharing their feelings about a recent argument, explaining how it made them feel hurt and disconnected. If their partner is distracted, checking their phone, or simply waiting for their turn to speak, the conversation loses its depth. But if the partner listens attentively, maintaining eye contact, nodding in understanding, and offering a soft response like, "I hear you," that sounds really painful, the connection deepens. In this moment, the act of listening itself becomes an act of love, of care, and of respect. But how do we become better listeners? The first step is to practice mindfulness in all of our interactions. This means being aware of when our thoughts begin to wander, of when we're more focused on ourselves than on the other person. It means giving our full attention to the moment and suspending any judgments or assumptions about what the other person is saying. Instead of planning our next response, we can pause, breathe, and simply listen. The next time you're in a conversation, especially with someone you care about, try this. Put away your phone, make eye contact, and allow yourself to truly listen. Don't just hear the words, feel the emotions behind them. Allow the silence to speak as well. In doing so, you'll create a space where both you and the other person can truly connect, and the relationship will be richer for it. In the end, the art of listening is about being present. It's about allowing someone the time and space to share without rushing to respond or fix things. It's about offering our full attention, our empathy, and our understanding. And in doing so, we not only deepen our relationships, but we also cultivate the kind of mindful presence that the Buddha himself so deeply cherished. By practicing this form of listening, we open the door to a world of authentic connection, where words are not just heard but truly felt. As we close today's journey, my friends, take a moment to reflect on what we've explored together. The 5 behaviors we've discussed, subtle yet powerful, are all rooted in one essential practice: mindfulness. Through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, we've learned that the way we show up in our relationships, the energy we bring, the words we speak, the way we listen, determines the depth of our connections with others. It is in this mindful awareness that true connection can blossom, free from the shadows of judgment, anxiety, or control. Life is a continuous unfolding, and just like a garden, our relationships require care, patience, and nurturing. The Buddha's teachings on loving kindness, patience, and mindfulness offer us the tools to foster relationships that not only bring us peace, but allow us to experience a sense of fulfillment and joy in the company of others. It is through our presence, our ability to show up fully with awareness, that we create the space for real, authentic connections to grow. So, as you move forward from this video, remember, mindfulness is not just a practice, it's a way of living. The more we align our actions with awareness, the more we can build relationships that are meaningful and lasting. Let this be a reminder to nurture those connections with patience, kindness, and a deep understanding that the truest form of connection happens when we are present and engaged in the moment. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey. Together we'll continue to explore how to live a life rooted in mindfulness and wisdom. Thank you for being part of this beautiful space, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon. May your path be filled with love, peace, and presence.